Okay, everyone. Good evening and welcome to tonight's webinar, the Massachusetts Legislature, Who, What, Where, When, Why, sponsored by the League of Women Voters of Massachusetts. I'm LWVMA Executive Director Meryl Kessler, and I'm joined on this webinar by our presenter, Nancy Brumback, who is the chair of the Legislative Action Committee. Before Nancy starts her presentation, I want to do a little housekeeping and explain the mechanics of how this webinar is going to work. Because we will have over 100 people participating, we have muted all of you to prevent background noise and interruptions. On your screen, you should see Nancy's slides for her presentation. After I'm finished with this housekeeping, Nancy will present her talk, which should run for about a half hour. We will allow her to finish before we take questions. There are two ways you can take questions on a webinar. The first way is to type a question into the chat box. To do that, you hover your cursor over the black bar at the bottom of the screen and click on Chat. You will type your question into the box and I will read it to Nancy, who will answer it. The second way you can ask a question is to raise your hand. To raise your hand on a webinar, again, someone's raising their hand, I can see that. Hover your cursor over the black bar at the bottom of the screen. Click on Raise Your Hand and I will be notified that your hand is raised. I will call on people who have raised their hands, unmute you, and then you can speak. Please be sure the audio is enabled on your computer if you want to speak. If your audio is not enabled, we will not be able to hear you. We will try our best to get to everyone's questions, but please understand if we are unable to get to you because of time limitations. If you still have questions after the webinar, you can contact Nancy at nbrumback, that's N-B-R-U-M-B-A-C-K, at LWVMA.org. If you are having technical problems during the webinar, please type into the chat box and let us know, and we will try to help you. So, without further ado, let me turn the mic over to Nancy Brumback.
Good evening, everybody. I'm glad that you're all that eager to learn about the legislature and the league. I am, as Meryl mentioned, I'm chair of the Legislative Action Committee. Next one, Meryl, next. The Legislative Action Committee is a group of 18 amazing volunteer specialists that cover legislation in 21 different subject areas. A couple of intrepid specialists cover more than one area. These specialists, the LAC determines which bills the league is going to follow during the legislative session. All the bills we follow have to be based on league positions. We can't, for example, we didn't follow any bills on marijuana because the league doesn't have any positions on marijuana. So our specialists work freely with other organizations in their subject area, single issue organizations. For example, our women's issue specialist works closely with Planned Parenthood. What the specialists do, they prepare and deliver testimony on bills, they meet with legislators, and they oversee league advocacy efforts. Some of those action alerts you get come from the specialists. You also might notice that you get a action newsletter at the first of every month with things you can do, actions you can take. Particularly as the legislature starts, there'll be actions you can take on legislation, and the specialists are the ones that send along those action items to take. There is a list of bills that we support or oppose on our LWVMA website. Right now, that list is the bills we supported and opposed in the last legislative session. We're in the middle of determining what bills we're going to take up this session, and that website will be changed to the current session probably within the next month or so. If you want to ask a specialist about a bill, we have an email called specialists at lwvma.org. Just send your email in and I'll get it to the right specialist, and you will hear back from them. So a little bit about the Massachusetts Legislature. This is Legislature 101. There are two chambers. The Senate has 40 members and the House has 160 members. Unlike Congress, the Massachusetts Legislature, all legislatures are elected every 2 years, senators and representatives. So since the legislature has a 2-year session, each new session starts with new legislators, except for incumbents that are reelected. So the 2-year sessions begin in the January of the odd-numbered year. The current session began on January 2nd, so we're just starting out this 2-year legislative session. While technically the legislative session runs through December 31st of 2020, for practical purposes, the formal session end date is July 31st of the even-numbered years, so this session that's just started will end on July 31st, 2020. You may wonder why it ends in July when it's supposed to go to the end of December. Go back up to that second bullet point. All legislators are elected every 2 years. In the fall of 2020, they're going to all be running for re-election. So that's, instead of spending their time legislating, they spend their time running. The legislature considers close to 10,000 bills every session. A lot of those are fairly small bills, things like granting liquor licenses, naming bridges and roads, considering town charter changes that have been submitted. But there are an awful lot of major bills as well, and it takes a lot of time. So next slide, Meryl. How a bill becomes a law. It starts with a petition. And that petition can come from a legislator. That's where most of them come from. Can come from the governor. That's where some of the big ones come from. State departments or agencies can submit laws or bills. And in Massachusetts, unlike most states, any citizen can file a petition to submit a bill to the legislature. They ask their senator or representative to submit the bill for them, and the senator and representative has to do that. So if you have a bill you want, you can do it. Not all laws are written by legislators. They don't know that much about every subject, and they don't have time to write them all. They are frequently written by interest groups. You probably think, yeah, the drug industry writes laws to cover the drug industry, and they do. But you know, the League of Women Voters of Massachusetts and its compatriots on the Election Modernization Committee write laws to influence voting in elections. The Election Day registration law that we'll be pushing this session was written by the Election Modernization Coalition. So next slide. So what's happening right now? First steps, bill sponsors are recruiting co-sponsors, asking their fellow legislators to sponsor their bills. In the House, the deadline for co-sponsors is February 1st, so it's quite frantic in the House right now. The Senate doesn't have a deadline, so it's a little more relaxed. The more co-sponsors a bill has, the more likely the bill is to be successful because the leadership will pay more attention to it. Bills are filed with the House or Senate clerk. The deadline for filing bills is the third Friday in January. So by last week, by January 18th, all 10,000 of those bills had to be filed. A bill can be filed late, but it requires the approval of both the House and the Senate Rules Committees to file it after that third Friday deadline. Bills are filed late, but it's usually they have a fair amount of support before they're allowed to be filed late. The other things that are happening right now are each House and Senate is establishing the rules it will operate under during the 2-year session. You may remember that this week you got an action alert from us urging you to ask your House representative to support certain reforms in the rules system. And I'll just mention that we got to be a little bit famous for that. Commonwealth Magazine has up on its website tonight an interview that the League of Women Voters is supporting some of those rules reforms. So that's kind of exciting. The other things that are happening right now is the leadership on the House and the Senate will be appointing committees and committee chairs over the next 2 or 3 weeks in the joint committees. Right now, these bills that were all filed have something called a docket number. You'll see the number is called SD or HD. That's a temporary number until they're assigned to a joint committee. At that point, they'll be assigned the bill number that you'll use to follow those bills during the session. And those bills will be referred to a joint committee. Next slide. While all this is going on in the House and Senate, the LAC is reviewing all these submitted bills. We're determining which are bills that we've already supported the previous session that didn't pass and have been refiled, and we'll take those up again this session. And then the specialist is also looking to which new bills that are being filed in her area that we want to support or oppose. We are very, very busy right now. Our specialists are meeting and talking to legislators to discuss which bills they're submitting, trying to decide which are the most important and most worthy of the limited time and effort we have. Remember, our specialists are all volunteers. They're meeting with coalition partners to discuss bills, and we rely a lot on the coalition partners, the single issue groups like Planned Parenthood or the Mass Rivers Alliance for water bills, things like that, because they have paid staff whose job it is to lobby on bills in those areas. So they are as attuned or more attuned than we are, and it helps us a lot to know what bills they're working on to help identify which ones we want to support or oppose as well. Next slide. The joint committees these bills are submitted to, there are 27 of them. They're mostly pretty, you've heard of them all. They're education, transportation, judiciary, and cover specific areas. Sometimes the legislature will set up a temporary joint committee. There was one last session to develop marijuana rules and legislation. That has become a permanent joint committee this session. Joint committees are made up of members of both the House and the Senate, proportional to the size of the House and the Senate, that 140 to 60. And there are members from both political parties on each joint committee. This is, for example, a bit of a challenge for the Republican senators. There aren't that many of them, and they have to serve on a lot of joint committees each. So next. What the joint committees do is to hold a public hearing on every bill. It's required by law that they have a hearing on every bill. Obviously, if they have several hundred bills before them, they don't hold several hundred hearings. They group the bills as much as 30 or 40 or 50 bills per hearing. Usually there'll be a whole lot of small bills that no one is very interested in except the person that wrote those bills. And then 2 or 3 major bills that they expect to have a lot of people coming in to testify on. The Joint Committee takes written testimony on the bills, and the League submits written testimony. It also takes oral testimony from anyone who wants to show up and give their opinion on a bill. So you can go and testify in front of a Joint Committee on any bill you want to. They give you 3 minutes. Next. What the League is doing at this point, the specialists are writing written testimony on every bill they're following, and that written testimony is submitted to the committee. It is also posted on our website as the hearings are held, so that you can go and see what we have asked the committee, why we have told the committee we're supporting this bill and want them to pass it. Specialists also give oral testimony at hearings on as many bills as they can. We try to testify in person. It's not always possible, and sometimes these hearings start at 2 in the afternoon and don't finish up till 9 or 10 o'clock at night. So sometimes it's not possible to sit through the whole thing and testify, but we try. Next. What happens after the hearings? The Joint Committee deliberates on the bills before it. They go over the testimony, and that's why written testimony is really important, because they have it in front of them. And then they decide what they're going to do with the bill. They can accept the bill as it's submitted. More often, they will revise the bill based on what they've heard in the testimony. And then frequently, they will combine several bills that are on the same subject into a new version, a single new version of a bill. You might remember that last session, criminal justice reform was a major issue. There were a couple of dozen criminal justice reform bills that were submitted to the legislature. The Joint Committee on the Judiciary took those couple of dozen bills, and they created from those an omnibus criminal justice bill that included most of the provisions that had been covered in the individual bills. That omnibus criminal justice bill was the one that the Joint Committee on the Judiciary reported out. That was what was voted on in the House and Senate and passed and signed by the governor. So a bill goes into a joint committee. It doesn't always come out or rarely comes out in the same shape. The joint committee decides when it reports a bill out, they will tell you whether it ought to pass, ought not to pass, or sometimes, not very often, refer to another committee they think should take a look at the bill as well. It may be a subject that more than one committee might want to weigh in on. Finally, they can recommend that the bill be sent for further study. That is the legislative euphemism for killed for this session. Once a bill is sent to study, that's it for the session, and you won't see it again. The joint committees have roughly a year to go through, hold all these hearings, and get these bills out of joint committee. Remember, right now, those bills are being assigned to joint committees as the committees are appointed. By February 5th, 2020, they are required to have all the bills reported out or sent to study. So they have a year now to do all this work on the bills in the joint committee. And what the league is doing while they're doing that is to work with their coalition partners and talk to members of the joint committee on possible revisions. We want to know what they're going to do with the bill. We want to make sure we still agree with what the bill once they've done it. Our specialists are trying to build support for the bills. We do that with lobby days and other advocacy actions, like urge you to contact your senator and representative about a bill. And we also, especially as it gets closer to that February 5th deadline and our bills are still sitting in joint committee, we urge the joint committee to report those bills out and to report them out favorably so that they can come to the floor for a vote. The bills can't come for a vote until the joint committees report them out. Next. So it's reported, your bill is reported out of the joint committee, and it goes to either the House or Senate. Usually that depends on whether the representative or the senator was the key person filing the bill. It goes through what's called a first reading, which is not really reading the bill on the floor. It's just saying it's its first reading, sent to a committee for review, then comes back for a second reading, and at that point it's the first chance for legislators to debate it, file motions about it, to file amendments to it. After that happens, the bill goes to something called the Committee on Bills in the third reading. They take a quick look at it to make sure it's grammatical, things like that. Next. And there. Next slide. Yes. So when it comes up to the third reading, there's one more chance to debate and make motions and amendments. This is when most of the action happens on the bill, on the floor. After they've done that, they will actually vote on the bill. You'll see on the website sometimes the bill has been passed to be engrossed by the Senate or the House. That's when they used to write it on parchment. That's where that term came from. So it's passed to be engrossed by one chamber. That means it has passed the Senate or it has passed the House. And what happens then? Next. Carol? Oh, and when it's in the first chamber, the league is sending action alerts to its members or putting in the action newsletter that you should contact your legislators because this bill is coming up for a vote and we want them a positive vote on it. Our specialists can talk to wavering legislators and kind of urge them to support the bill. And we are doing lobbying with our coalition partners while we're waiting for the bill to come up for a vote. It goes to the next chamber, the other chamber, moves through those same process of 3 readings as it did in the Senate or House. The league is taking the same actions to persuade the lawmakers in the other chambers. If a bill is amended in the second chamber, it returns to the first chamber because it needs to have the concurrence of the legislators in the first chamber on any amendments. Next. If they don't get that concurrence, if the Senate and the House pass different versions of a bill, a conference committee is formed to consider that bill. It has to reconcile the 2 versions into one bill that both houses agree on. The conference committee has 3 members from each chamber, 3 senators, 3 representatives. They have to be Democrats and Republicans, so generally 2 Democrats and 1 Republican from each chamber. Once the conference committee has debated, argued, and agreed on a final version of this bill, it goes to each house, goes to the House and Senate to be voted on. It cannot be amended anymore in those chambers. It can only be voted yes or no by the chambers. So the final version is it. It either lives or dies as it is. Next. At this point, we frequently contact conference committee members, especially if there's an amendment that we really want to stay in the bill, like if the Senate has put in an amendment that we think is really strong, or if we think certain Senate amendments and certain House amendments are better, we will tell them. Our specialists also review the final version of the bill to make sure we still support it, because things can be added that make a bill something we don't want. And we send action alerts to members as that final version of the bill, assuming we like it, comes up for final votes. Then it goes to the governor. The governor can sign it. Yay! The governor can allow it to become law without a signature. He can veto it, and it takes 2/3 of both chambers to override that veto. And finally, the governor can send the bill back to the legislature and suggest amendments to it. The House and Senate then have to review those amendments. That's what happened with the civics education bill that was passed last year. It passed both houses, went to the governor, and the governor said, I think it should have these couple of tweaks in it. For example, he wanted the projects that the kids would do under the civics bill to be nonpartisan. So the bill goes back for amendments. The House and Senate decide if they agree with the governor's amendments. In that case, they did. They sent it back to the governor, and then he signed it. So if he sends it back with amendments, the legislature has to decide whether they agree with that. If they don't agree with it, but think they can override a veto, they might not put in the amendments. If they think it needs the amendments and they can't override a veto, then they'll change the amendments and send it back to the governor for a signature. Next. So that's how bills become the law, but you can have, the specialists aren't the only people to make their opinions known, the league's opinions known. We like to have our individual members also do some lobbying. So these next couple of slides are going to be how you can lobby rather than how the specialists lobby. The reason to lobby is to make your opinions known to your own senators and representatives and to educate them on the issue. Remember, they don't know everything about every issue, about all 10,000 bills. They need the only way they will know this is if you tell them. You go to your legislator, your senator or representative to ask for a specific action. You'll ask them, right now you would ask them to co-sponsor a bill. You might ask your senator to ask the joint committee to release a bill if it's getting close to that February deadline date. And of course you might ask them to vote for the bill when it comes up, when it's actually on the floor. You know, lobbying is not a dirty word. Paid lobbyists and special interests do it, and we think, oh, they're lobbyists. But we do it too, and it's the only way your legislators will hear your side. I had a senator, he represents Lexington, tell me when they were debating gun control legislation that if he had just paid attention to the emails and phone calls he got on gun control legislation, he would have thought that Lexington absolutely opposed any regulations on guns at all. Because who did he hear from? He heard from the gun lobbyists, the NRA people. He didn't hear from all the other people living in Lexington that he was pretty sure supported gun control legislation. So it is important to tell your senator or representative what you think, even if you know he or she agrees with you on a bill, because that gives them the off to go to the leadership and say, I am hearing from a lot of people in support of this bill, and I think we ought to move it up in the legislative agenda. So telling your legislature, even if you agree with it, if he agrees with you, gives him some power to take action. And one other thing, you really should talk to your own senator and your own representative. I had a representative tell me once, you know, it doesn't take a lot of commitment to click on a poll. But if it's my people in my district, then I pay attention. So don't send mass emails to every senator in the legislature. Send a letter to your senator. When you communicate with your legislators, identify yourself and give your home address. They need to know that you're a constituent. Tell them what you want them to do. Be specific. Tell them why you want them to do it. And if you have a personal experience that bill particularly addresses, be sure to mention it, because that's the kind of thing that sticks in people's minds. And finally, don't argue with them. Be polite. If they don't agree with you, thank them for listening and keep the door open. You may need to talk to them about something else in the future. Next. If you're going to have an in-person meeting, if you call the legislator's office and make up an appointment at Beacon Hill, understand you might meet with an aide, and that's okay. It's actually good, because the legislative aides are the ones that keep track of everything and brief the legislator as a bill is coming up for a vote. Limit your meetings to 10, 15 minutes. They don't want to listen to you for an hour. Bring with you and leave behind some succinct and specific written information about the bill, why you want it. And be sure, again, has your contact information on it with your home address so they know that you're a constituent. You don't have to schlep into Beacon Hill. Most legislators have in-district office hours. You can give a quick call to the office and ask when the next one is and where it is, and go talk to either the legislator or sometimes their aides there. It's a lot easier than parking in downtown Boston. Next. We frequently, in our action alerts and action newsletter, ask you to call your legislator. Here's how you do it. You call them, and again, what do you say? You say, I live at this street in your district. I am a constituent, is what you are telling them. Then ask them specifically what bill you want them to vote for. This is a slide from last legislature when we were doing automatic voter registration. So I want you to vote for Senate Bill 373, which brings automatic voter registration to the state. The receptionist says, fine, thank you for calling. That's all you need to do. They're keeping a tally list. of pros and cons on every bill. So you just want to click that tally list up one. Next slide. If you write or email instead, and I suspect most of you are going to be emailing, address only one issue. If you have 7 things that you're interested in, do 7 emails, not one email with 7 things in it, because they are filing these emails under each bill number, and you can't do that if there's 7 bills in one email. So include a succinct and relevant subject line with the bill number in the subject line. Again, when you, in the body of the email, make sure that you have your street address so they know that you're a constituent. Be clear what bill you're talking about and what you want them to do. And again, if you can put a little personal anecdote, all the better. Next. And if you didn't write all this down, you can find it all in a handbook we have on our website called the Citizen Lobbyists, LWVMA.org. If you go to the home page there, on the right, there's a link to the Citizen Lobbyist. Take a look at it. It's about a 5-page how to lobby publication that we do, that Meryl put together. So thank you, Meryl. Next. This is a little bit, if you're looking for background information on a bill, this is what the legislator's website looks like. It's the website is pretty simple, malegislature.gov. This is the home page. In that white bar, you'll see several tabs. Bills and laws is where you find information about bills, surprise. Legislators, click there, and there's a tab that takes you to all senators, all reps, and there's on the left side, there's something called Find Your Legislator. If you click on that and enter your address, it will automatically tell you who your senator and representative is and take you to their websites. Hearings and events, as we get into the hearing schedule time, it'll tell you when hearings are scheduled, not nearly far enough in advance, but when hearings are scheduled. Committees will tell you who is on each joint committee and how to contact the committee. Next slide. Poke around on this website. It's kind of interesting. This is what a bill's website looks like. It includes the principal sponsor of the bill. In this case, it was Cindy Cream. On the left here, download PDF. If you click on that, it will open up the actual printed version of the bill. You can't see the whole page here, but this tab, the tab at the bottom called Bill History, will tell you exactly what is happening with the bill as it's happening. A key thing, we list the initial bill number on our website. Bill numbers change dozens of times in the course of a bill's process through the legislature. Every time there's changed in the wording of the bill, bill number changes. So this bill history will record that, and if you look at the last item, the bill number there would be the current bill number. But you can always find where it is, starting with the original bill number, which will be the one that's posted on our website. Next. If you were looking up your legislator, this is what the legislator's webpage looks like. It has their email address, their phone number, their fax number. Does anybody send faxes anymore? If they have a formal district office that's open all the time, as Jamie Eldridge does, we'll give you that information. Then at the bottom, there will be a list of a tab for the bills that they sponsor or co-sponsor, another tab for their district, so you know what towns are in their districts. Sometimes it's some biographical information. So interesting webpage for each of the legislators. Next. And this is what a joint committee webpage would look like. Has how to contact the members of that committee. It lists the chairs of the joint committees, and then below it all the members of it. In the right-hand corner up here, it will tell you if they've got an upcoming hearing. Hearings are usually posted. It'd be wonderful if they were posted 2 weeks in advance. Sometimes it's no more than 2 days in advance. This is Again, the committees haven't been appointed yet, so this is last session's information. Also on the committee, there are tabs for not only the members, but the bills that that are before those committees, when hearings are scheduled or have been scheduled, and then a little bit about what the committee covers. I think that's the last one, isn't it, Meryl? No. For more information, go to our website. It has a lot of stuff on it. You can look at the bills we support and opposed last session, and sometime in the next 4 to 6 weeks, we'll start putting up the ones we're following in this session. Take a look at the Citizen Lobbyist Handbook, and if you have questions, you can email LWVMA.org or nbrumback@LWVMA.org, or call the office and they'll refer you to me. So, questions?
So, thank you, Nancy, for that incredibly informative and thorough presentation. We have a couple of questions that have been typed in. The first question for you is, are joint committees evenly represented by Republicans and Democrats?
They're proportionally represented, so no. Usually there's 1 or 2 Republicans, senators, 1 or 2 Republican House members and 1 Republican senator. There are not many Republican senators total. I think there are 5 or 6. So no, it's proportional to the party's representation in the entire legislature.
Next question. There's been a lot of important activity lately. Is there a point where contacting our rep can become white noise because we talk to them about so many topics so often, or do they want to hear about all of them?
Well, whether they want to or not, you should tell them. Again, what they keep is a running tally on whether bills are getting pro or con responses. The thing I would tell you is please pay attention to the first of the month action newsletter we get. It will give you an idea of when is a good time to contact your legislature on a certain bill. For example, if that bill is coming up for a hearing, that's a good time to contact them because that bill is top of the mind. This is a marathon, it's not a sprint. They will be discussing these bills for another year. It only becomes a sprint in July of 2020 when they all come up at once. So pace yourself. And the best, it's not, for example, there's no point in contacting people about bills in the House in April because they're working on the budget, and in the Senate in May because the Senate is working on the budget. That sucks all the oxygen out of the system. So you can now tell them what bills you like, and you can ask them to co-sponsor bills. You can ask your senators anytime in the next couple of months to co-sponsor a bill. If there's a House bill you want your representative to co-sponsor, do it now before February 1st.
Nancy, we have a couple of questions specifically about related to the league and lobbying. So the first question is, the person wants to know, can you tell me what positions, directors, presidents, voter service, cannot lobby our state legislature? Is it league specific per bylaws? And she also notes, thanks for the help, great program.
Any league member can lobby the state legislature, but only as a league member on bills that we have chosen to support, okay? The bills we're chosen to support will be on our website. Those are the ones the state league has decided it is going to work on in this particular legislative session. If the bill you really like is not up there, you're more than welcome to lobby on it, but not in the name of the league. There are bills that we don't have positions on, so we don't support them. Again, our 18 lobbyists our specialists are volunteers. They only follow 3, 4, 5 bills each. So there are many, many bills that we do not support because we don't have the time, the manpower, the resources, because we don't think the bill is going to pass, so we don't want to spend those time and resources on it, or because we don't have a position that lets us support the bill, or because we are trying to focus on big picture policy bills instead of little, okay, classic example, people keep saying, why aren't you supporting the plastic bag ban? Because our environmental specialist is working on climate change, and she thinks that's the much more important thing to put her time and energy into than banning plastic bags. So that's a decision she's made. She only has X amount of time, and that's where she's putting her time and energy. So we are not going to support the plastic bag ban because we don't have enough people to do it.
So
that one in your town.
Nancy, a related question that came in from a different person is, what do I have to do if I'd like the League of Women Voters of Massachusetts to support a bill?
Contact me. Tell me about it. I won't promise to do it, but at least ask. Again, what I just said, there's a limited amount of time and energy, and also it may be a bill that we don't have a specialist to do it on. We can't do this work on bills that we don't have somebody to do the work with. We're volunteers. There are often bills that people want us to support that just don't fall into one of the areas we're working on. But ask.
And there's a similar question if a local league wants to support a bill. I'm assuming
it has to be one
would be the same. They want to know, should they start by sending an email to the LAC to see if it's on your radar?
Send me an email. But again, local leagues can't support bills that aren't on this list that will be on the website. Again, and that list will be developing in the course of the next 2-3 months. But because we have to speak with one voice. And at the state level, the state league decides what we're going to work on. We won't come to you and tell you what you should do in your town.
Someone wants to understand better the relation between the February 1st deadline in the House and the third Friday in January deadline.
Okay, the third Friday in January deadline, all the bills that are going to be considered this year have to be filed with the House or Senate clerk by that date. Okay? So all the legislators have been filing the bills then. The February 1st deadline is to recruit co-sponsors for your bill. So if you've got a bill that you want, for example, we're working on an election day registration bill, and we would like representatives to co-sponsor that bill. So we have until February 1st to ask state representatives to co-sponsor the election day registration bill. There is no similar deadline for co-sponsors in the Senate. So the Senate version of the election day registration bill, people can sign on, senators can sign on to co-sponsor that anytime. I don't know why.
A related question is, why are some bills listed as both House and Senate bills? What if there's only a House bill? Does it make sense to ask your senator to co-sponsor?
I don't know. There are, most often the bills that we're supporting are pretty big bills, and there's both a Senate and a House version of the bill. It's the same bill, and a senator introduces it in the Senate, and a House, representative introduces it in the House, and they line up co-sponsors that way. But that's, did I answer the question? I've forgotten exactly what it was. They're the same bills. And on our website, it'll be listed, if it's the same bill, it'll be listed with a Senate number and a House number, so that you know it's the same bill.
We have a couple of questions. I'm going to kind of group them together about the politics of co-sponsoring a bill, and specifically what do you do if your rep says he's a member of the leadership and he can't co-sponsor a bill? Is there any tactic or way that you can persuade him or her to use their influence? And similarly, someone wants to know about the role of the speaker in moving a legislation forward.
Remind me of that one in a minute, Meryl. Frequently committee chairs will not co-sponsor bills. Members of the leadership don't co-sponsor bills. Sometimes senators and representatives just decide they are not going to co-sponsor any more than 2 or 3 or 4 bills that they really feel strongly about. Some senators and representatives will co-sponsor just about anything they agree with. It's a sort of a personal thing. Some people don't think that they should co-sponsor just everything. Some people trade. I'll co-sponsor yours if you co-sponsor mine. There are a lot of reasons, and if a rep or a senator tells you that they prefer not to co-sponsor it, the thing to do is to tell them thank you very much for their consideration, and you hope they will support the bill even if they don't feel they can co-sponsor it. You asked about the role of the speaker and his leadership team in legislation.
That's correct.
Powerful would be the word I would use. You've probably been reading some of the information about how strong the speaker is. The speaker needs to, if not support, at least not oppose a bill for it to get to the floor. And as bills move forward, once it gets close to the decision-making time, the ask that you make to your state representative is to talk to the Speaker's office and ask them to move the bill to the floor for a vote. So it is crucial. There is if you look at that Commonwealth Magazine article that is up there now, and there is some activity to make it a little fairer, to make it possible to get bills to the floor of the vote for a vote without going, even if the leadership isn't in favor of them. One of the things we supported in that action alert was that if bills are supported by a large number of legislators, they should come to the floor for a vote. We'll see how it goes.
Nancy, I'm going to take one more question right now off of out of the chat box, and then maybe we have a couple of people with their hands raised. So let me do the chat one first. It's mostly a procedural question, which is when we send an email to our legislators regarding a bill the league supports, should we identify ourselves as a league member? Definitely.
Please do. It gives us more clout on all the other bills that we support.
Okay. We're going to take a question with a hand up from Vivian. And Vivian, I'm unmuting you. And if you are unmuted as well, you should be able to speak.
And how's that working?
Vivian, are you there?
Yes. Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Oh, great. So my question has to do with how an individual member can possibly lobby the leagues. How can we get you interested in something that maybe you haven't turned your attention to, or, you know, this is all hypothetical, or, you know, slightly, you know, tweak or modify your position on a position you have taken? How do we get you to maybe, you know, introduce a bill, get behind the bill and try to gather legislative support for something new?
Talk to me.
Okay.
Give me a call or send me an email.
Right. Okay.
Again, if the bill is in an area that we don't have a specialist in, and the specialist is listed on the website, we don't have a warm body to do it.
Right.
Okay? We can't take up a bill that's in an area we don't have coverage in because there's no one to do it.
But
if
what
you are interested in volunteering to be a specialist in an area we're not covered,
that was my second question. So my question is how does one volunteer to be a specialist?
Talk to me.
Okay. Okay.
And all of you out there, if any of you are interested in transportation, our transportation specialist really needs a co-specialist. So being a specialist is not just following one or two bills. You also become a member of the Legislative Action Committee, which means that you sit through presentations from all the other specialists. The committee as a whole decides, votes on these bills. So it's much more than just, I really like this bill, so I'll become a specialist to support this one bill. It is a commitment, but it's a really interesting job as well.
Does the league ever send out a call for specialists? You know, for example, the league would say, you know, we find X, Y, and Z subjects really interesting and worthwhile, but we lack, you know, capacity. Is somebody already well versed in this area? Does anybody want to become even better versed in a particular area?
We occasionally ask that question. I don't know whether people are listening. It also has to be an area that we have positions in.
Right.
To use an example, we would not have taken up bills on legalization of marijuana and marijuana legislation because we don't have a position. Right. And there are a number of areas that at the state, we can use state and national positions, but if we don't have one, we can't follow legislation in that area. We can only do so much.
Vivian, great questions. Nancy, I thought this might be a good opportunity for you just to briefly mention the Legislative Envoy Program as a way for people who think they might be interested in becoming specialists to dip their toe in the water.
Okay. One of our specialists, Colleen Kirby, who has done yeoman work on criminal justice reform, felt the need to have a person in each local league that she could get in touch with if she needed a push for a legislator in a town that league was in to do something. That wasn't very clear. The envoy, so she set up the Legislative Envoy Program. The envoys are local league members, volunteers, who have said, you know, I am willing to go and become known to my senators and representatives, the ones that are in the towns that my league covers, and become friends with them, have them know me as a member of the Lexington League. And then when one of those legislators happens to maybe chair a committee that a specialist is interested in, has a bill in, then the specialist can go to that person and say, do this. Colleen just, for example, had the envoys ask their House members to co-sponsor certain bills that are left over from last year that we know that we're going to be supporting this year. So it's a way, if you, again, go on their website and click and put Legislative Envoy in the search box, you'll find information about what that program is, and take a look and see if it's something you might be interested in.
Nancy, we have one more hand up from Sharon. Sharon, I'm going to allow you to talk. And let's see if you're there. Let's give Sharon a second.
Be sure to unmute. I guess you're muting though, aren't you?
I've unmuted Sharon, so she should be able to talk.
Hi there. Can you hear me?
I can.
Oh, good. I just wanted to say thank you so much for having this session. I've been trying to work on the local level for a while, and just understanding the process is very confusing. So this is wonderful. I really thank you. I just wanted to share a couple of things that I have learned as I'm navigating through this as just a local person. The website, which you had some screenshots of for the legislation, if you click on the print preview button, that was one of the buttons on the left-hand side, that will actually show you all the current sponsors of a bill, which was very important for me because I was trying to encourage my local legislators, and I had no way of knowing whether they had done it or not. But that print preview button will show you all the sponsors in a heartbeat, which was really, really, really helpful. One thing about that website that was not helpful is that if you are trying to contact a legislator that is not your own, you have to know the zip code of one of the towns that that legislator represents, which was very difficult. I found myself going to the post office, looking, website, looking up towns and so forth. So that was a challenge for me.
UP, the Postal Service website, you can do zip codes. The reason they do that is legislators do not pay much attention to communications from people outside their districts. They really don't. Maybe if I come in representing the state league, they'll listen to me, but they are concerned with the people whose ballot they're going to be on. So yes. It is really important to contact your own senator and representative, and you will have very little success and impact contacting any others.
Well, I hear you, and in fact, that is the entire principle of the Indivisible Guide. You contact your own members of Congress. But the reason that I was trying to find that is because I wanted to be able to say to my legislator, look, the town right next to ours, their legislator is supporting this. Sometimes there's value in being able to point to another district that's already taken that step. It makes it.
Let me go back. One other point you made. You mentioned that you can go to the legislature's website, go to the bill page, and click on it to find out who the sponsors are.
Yes,
that is true once those bills are posted. Right now, though, you can't do that because the House bills are not available on the website because they haven't been assigned a number yet. Or in the Senate bills, you might be able to get the text. For if it has, what you see now is a SD number or an HD number. That means Senate docket or House docket. They have not been assigned their final full number, which is usually HB as in boy or as in Bill, or SB as in Bill. So you can't find out right now who the House co-sponsors are because the House bills are not available on the website.
Nancy, Sharon, thank you for your question, and Nancy, thank you for your thorough response. We are actually at the end of our hour, so if anyone has further questions for Nancy, as we mentioned at the beginning, you can reach her by email at nbrumback, NBRUMBACK at LWVMA.org. Feel free to get in touch with her. If
you forget that, just LWVMA at LWVMA.org.
That's true too. I know she would be happy to follow up with you on any questions you have. Nancy, thank you again so much for taking the time to really share your knowledge about the legislature with our membership, and thank everybody who was on the webinar for your participation and your really great questions. And to answer a question that we got earlier, yes, this is being recorded and it will be up on our website, and we will also share out the slides as well.